Hello dears. This is the story The Grasshopper by Anton Chekhov. Of all the mass of acquaintances who, in this house 25 to 35 years ago, had eaten, drunk, masqueraded, fallen in love, married, bored us with accounts of their splendid packs of hounds and horses, the only one still living was Ivan Ivanitch Bragin. At one time he had been very active, talkative, noisy, and given to falling in love, and had been famous for his extreme views and for the peculiar charm of his face, which fascinated men as well as women. Now he was an old man, had grown corpulent, and was living out his days with neither views nor charm. He came the day after getting my letter, in the evening just as the samovar was brought into the dining room and little Maria Gerasimovna had begun slicing the lemon. "I am very glad to see you, my dear fellow," I said gaily, meeting him. "Why, you are stouter than ever." "It isn't getting stout, it's swelling," he answered. "The bees must have stung me." With the familiarity of a man laughing at his own fatness, he put his arms round my waist and laid on my breast his big soft head, with the hair combed down on the forehead like a little Russian's, and went off into a thin, aged laugh. "And you go on getting younger," he said through his laugh. "I wonder what dye you use for your hair and beard. You might let me have some of it." Sniffing and gasping, he embraced me and kissed me on the cheek. "You might give me some of it," he repeated. "Why, you are not 40, are you?" "Alas, I am 46. I said, laughing. Ivan Ivanitch smelt of tallow candles and cooking, and that suited him. His big, puffy, slow-moving body was swathed in a long frock coat like a coachman's full coat, with a high waist, and with hooks and eyes instead of buttons, and it would have been strange if he had smelt of eau de cologne, for instance. In his long, unshaven, bluish double chin, which looked like a thistle, his goggle eyes, his shortness of breath, and in the whole of his clumsy, slovenly figure, in his voice, his laugh, and his words, it was difficult to recognize the graceful, interesting talker who used in old days to make the husbands of the district jealous on account of their wives. "I am in great need of your assistance, my friend," I said, when we were sitting in the dining room, drinking tea. "I want to organize relief for the starving peasants, and I don't know how to set about it. So perhaps you will be so kind as to advise me." "Yes, yes, yes," said Ivan Ivanitch, sighing. To be sure, to be sure, to be sure. I would not have worried you, my dear fellow, but really there is no one here but you I can appeal to. You know what people are like about here. To be sure, to be sure, to be sure. Yes. I thought that as we were going to have a serious, business consultation in which anyone might take part, regardless of their position or personal relations, why should I not invite Natalia Gavrilovna? Tres facient collegium, I said gaily. What if we were to ask Natalia Gavrilovna? What do you think? Fenya, I said, turning to the maid, ask Natalia Gavrilovna to come upstairs to us, if possible at once. Tell her it's a very important matter. A little later Natalia Gavrilovna came in. I got up to meet her and said, "Excuse us for troubling you, Natalie. We are discussing a very important matter, and we had the happy thought that we might take advantage of your good advice, which you will not refuse to give us. Please sit down." Ivan Ivanitch kissed her hand while she kissed his forehead. Then, when we all sat down to the table, he, looking at her tearfully and blissfully, craned forward to her and kissed her hand again. She was dressed in black, her hair was carefully arranged, and she smelt of fresh scent. She had evidently dressed to go out or was expecting somebody. Coming into the dining room, she held out her hand to me with simple friendliness, and smiled to me as graciously as she did to Ivan Ivanitch. That pleased me, but as she talked she moved her fingers, often and abruptly leaned back in her chair and talked rapidly, and this jerkiness in her words and movements irritated me and reminded me of her native town Odessa, where the society, men and women alike, had wearied me by its bad taste. "I want to do something for the famine-stricken peasants," I began, And after a brief pause I went on, money, of course, is a great thing, but to confine oneself to subscribing money, and with that to be satisfied, would be evading the worst of the trouble. Help must take the form of money, but the most important thing is a proper and sound organization. Let us think it over, my friends, and do something. Natalia Gavrilovna looked at me inquiringly and shrugged her shoulders as though to say, "What do I know about it?" Yes, famine, muttered Ivan Ivanitch. Certainly, yes. It's a serious position, I said, and assistance is needed as soon as possible. I imagine the first point among the principles which we must work out ought to be promptitude. We must act on the military principles of judgment, promptitude, and energy. Yes, promptitude, repeated Ivan Ivanitch in a drowsy and listless voice, as though he were dropping asleep. Only one can't do anything. The crops have failed, and so what's the use of all your judgment and energy? It's the elements. You can't go against God and fate. Yes, but that's what man has a head for, to contend against the elements. Eh? Yes, that's so, to be sure. Yes. Ivan Ivanitch sneezed into his handkerchief, brightened up, and as though he had just woken up, looked round at my wife and me. My crops have failed, too. He laughed a thin little laugh and gave a sly wink as though this were really funny. No money, no corn, and a yard full of laborers like Count Sheremetyev's. I want to kick them out, but I haven't the heart to. Natalia Gavrilovna laughed, and began questioning him about his private affairs. Her presence gave me a pleasure such as I had not felt for a long time, and I was afraid to look at her for fear my eyes would betray my secret feeling. Our relations were such that that feeling might seem surprising and ridiculous. She laughed and talked with Ivan Ivanitch without being in the least disturbed that she was in my room and that I was not laughing. And so, my friends, what are we to do? I asked after waiting for a pause. I suppose before we do anything else we had better immediately open a subscription list. We will write to our friends in the capitals and in Odessa, Natalie, and ask them to subscribe. When we have got together a little sum we will begin buying corn and fodder for the cattle, and you, Ivan Ivanitch, will you be so kind as to undertake distributing the relief? Entirely relying on your characteristic tact and efficiency, we will only venture to express a desire that before you give any relief you make acquaintance with the details of the case on the spot, and also, which is very important, you should be careful that corn should be distributed only to those who are in genuine need, and not to the drunken, the idle, or the dishonest. Yes, muttered Ivan Ivanitch. To be sure. Well, one won't get much done with that slobbering wreck, I thought, and I felt irritated. I am sick of these famine-stricken peasants, bother them. It's nothing but grievances with them. Ivan Ivanitch went on, sucking the rind of the lemon. The hungry have a grievance against those who have enough, and those who have enough have a grievance against the hungry. Yes, hunger stupefies and maddens a man and makes him savage. Hunger is not a potato. When a man is starving he uses bad language, and steals, and may do worse. One must realize that. Ivan Ivanitch choked over his tea, coughed, and shook all over with a squeaky, smothered laughter. There was a battle at Poltava, he brought out, gesticulating with both hands in protest against the laughter and coughing which prevented him from speaking. There was a battle at Poltava. When 3 years after the emancipation we had famine in 2 districts here, Fyodor Fyodorovich came and invited me to go to him. Come along. He persisted, and nothing else would satisfy him. Very well, let us go, I said. And so we set off. It was in the evening, there was snow falling. Towards night we were getting near his place, and suddenly from the wood came bang, and another time bang. Oh, damn it all. I jumped out of the sledge, and I saw in the darkness a man running up to me, knee-deep in the snow. I put my arm round his shoulder, like this, and knocked the gun out of his hand. Then another one turned up. I fetched him a knock on the back of his head so that he grunted and flopped with his nose in the snow. I was a sturdy chap then, my fist was heavy, I disposed of 2 of them, and when I turned round Fyodor was sitting astride of a third. We did not let our 3 fine fellows go, we tied their hands behind their backs so that they might not do us or themselves any harm, and took the fools into the kitchen. We were angry with them and at the same time ashamed to look at them. They were peasants we knew, and were good fellows, we were sorry for them. They were quite stupid with terror. One was crying and begging our pardon, the second looked like a wild beast and kept swearing, the third knelt down and began to pray. I said to Fedya, "Don't bear them a grudge, let them go, the rascals." He fed them, gave them a bushel of flour each, and let them go. "Get along with you," he said. So that's what he did. The kingdom of heaven be his and everlasting peace. He understood and did not bear them a grudge, but there were some who did, and how many people they ruined. Yes. Why, over the affair at the Klochkov's tavern 11 men were sent to the disciplinary battalion. Yes. And now, look, it's the same thing. Anasayan, the investigating magistrate, stayed the night with me last Thursday, and he told me about some landowner. Yes. They took the wall of his barn to pieces at night and carried off 20 sacks of rye. When the gentleman heard that such a crime had been committed, he sent a telegram to the governor and another to the police captain, another to the investigating magistrate. Of course, everyone is afraid of a man who is fond of litigation. The authorities were in a flutter and there was a general hubbub. 2 villages were searched. "Excuse me, Ivan Ivanitch," I said. 20 sacks of rye were stolen from me, and it was I who telegraphed to the governor. I telegraphed to Petersburg, too. But it was by no means out of love for litigation, as you are pleased to express it, and not because I bore them a grudge. I look at every subject from the point of view of principle. From the point of view of the law, theft is the same whether a man is hungry or not. Yes, yes, muttered Ivan Ivanitch in confusion. Of course. To be sure, yes. Natalia Gavrilovna blushed. There are people, she said and stopped. She made an effort to seem indifferent, but she could not keep it up, and looked into my eyes with the hatred that I know so well. There are people, she said, for whom famine and human suffering exist simply that they may vent their hateful and despicable temperaments upon them. I was confused and shrugged my shoulders. I meant to say generally, she went on, that there are people who are quite indifferent and completely devoid of all feeling of sympathy, yet who do not pass human suffering by, but insist on meddling for fear people should be able to do without them. Nothing is sacred for their vanity. There are people, I said softly, who have an angelic character, but who express their glorious ideas in such a form that it is difficult to distinguish the angel from an Odessa market woman. I must confess it was not happily expressed. My wife looked at me as though it cost her great effort to hold her tongue. Her sudden outburst, and then her inappropriate eloquence on the subject of my desire to help the famine-stricken peasants, was, to say the least, out of place. When I had invited her to come upstairs I had expected quite a different attitude to me and my intentions. I cannot say definitely what I had expected, but I had been agreeably agitated by the expectation. Now I saw that to go on speaking about the famine would be difficult and perhaps stupid. Yes, Ivan Ivanitch muttered inappropriately. Burov, the merchant, must have 400,000 at least. I said to him, hand over 1,000 or 2,000 to the famine. You can't take it with you when you die, anyway. He was offended. But we all have to die, you know. Death is not a potato. A silence followed again. So there's nothing left for me but to reconcile myself to loneliness, I sighed. One cannot fight single-handed. Well, I will try single-handed. Let us hope that my campaign against the famine will be more successful than my campaign against indifference. I am expected downstairs, said Natalia Gavrilovna. She got up from the table and turned to Ivan Ivanitch. So you will look in upon me downstairs for a minute? I won't say goodbye to you. And she went away. Ivan Ivanitch was now drinking his 7th glass of tea, choking, smacking his lips, and sucking sometimes his moustache, sometimes the lemon. He was muttering something drowsily and listlessly, and I did not listen but waited for him to go. At last, with an expression that suggested that he had only come to me to take a cup of tea, he got up and began to take leave. As I saw him out I said, "And so you have given me no advice?" "Eh? I am a feeble, stupid old man," he answered. "What use would my advice be? You shouldn't worry yourself. I really don't know why you worry yourself. Don't disturb yourself, my dear fellow. Upon my word, there's no need," he whispered genuinely and affectionately, soothing me as though I were a child. "Upon my word, there's no need." "No need? Why, the peasants are pulling the thatch off their huts, and they say there is typhus somewhere already." "Well, what of it? If there are good crops next year, they'll thatch them again, and if we die of typhus others will live after us. Anyway, we have to die, if not now, later. Don't worry yourself, my dear." "I can't help worrying myself," I said irritably. We were standing in the dimly lighted vestibule. Ivan Ivanitch suddenly took me by the elbow, and, preparing to say something evidently very important, looked at me in silence for a couple of minutes. "Pavel Andreitch," he said softly, and suddenly in his puffy, set face and dark eyes there was a gleam of the expression for which he had once been famous and which was truly charming. "Pavel Andreitch, I speak to you as a friend, try to be different. One is ill at ease with you, my dear fellow, one really is." He looked intently into my face, the charming expression faded away, his eyes grew dim again, and he sniffed and muttered feebly. "Yes, yes. Excuse an old man. It's all nonsense, yes." As he slowly descended the staircase, spreading out his hands to balance himself and showing me his huge, bulky back and red neck, he gave me the unpleasant impression of a sort of crab. "You ought to go away, Your Excellency," he muttered. "To Petersburg or abroad. Why should you live here and waste your golden days? You are young, wealthy, and healthy." "Yes. Ah, if I were younger I would whisk away like a hare, and snap my fingers at everything." Thank you for watching.